Do you know me? I am the storyteller. I'm older than time, I'm newer than a breath, and everything that ever was, is, or will be exists in me. I am the storyteller. I'm older than time, newer than tomorrow. I am the past, the present, and the future. I am the storyteller. Do you know me?
This is the planet we live on. A place of residence for a variety of species, including humans. This is the world that we have created. And then there are the stories that we tell ourselves. Thousands of years ago, this is the land where indigenous people found their stories. But this isn't where our stories are born in the current world. So, where do our stories come from? There is an intricate web of storytelling going on all the time. We proliferate, create, and invent new stories and new ways of telling them. The purpose and intent of storytelling is something we rarely consider. The world is full of stories in our lives, our homes, and our lounge rooms. For every masterpiece, a million more stories are being imagined, conceived, crafted, written down, or produced. Stories represent our community and our culture. They also reflect our ideals, our beliefs, our vision for our lives. I'm on a mission. I'm searching for answers as I investigate the phenomenon and our reasons for telling stories. I'd like to know what the real story is behind all stories. Our beliefs about ourselves, our lives, the values and ideals of our culture, nation, and groups are reflected in the stories we tell ourselves. I'm investigating what it means to tell and create all stories. In this insider's view of story, we look behind the scenes as we meet some of the various makers and creators of stories.
My name is Drouyn. I'm a storyteller. I created over 900 hours of Australian television on home and away, told stories that had never been told on a soap before. I told the stories on Prisoner for more than 5 years and created the characters. I killed Maggie Doyle on Blue Heelers.
Do you see yourself as a writer or a storyteller?
Not all writers are storytellers, and not all storytellers are writers. Some are directors, some are, well, artists, like your good self. So I see myself as a storyteller first. I think they're two entirely different things. There are a lot of people who can write, but not that many who have anything to say. And I think there's a lot of writers who are not storytellers. Storytellers tend to always have something to say.
Storytelling is a specific skill.
It's probably the oldest skill of all. I mean, we all started out being told stories. We've all told stories. Life is a story. Every day is a separate story. And you don't know what the ending of it's going to be. The problem we have, of course, is that we've grown up believing that you know, stories have a beginning, once upon a time, and then they have a journey, and then they lived happily ever after, and they don't always live happily ever after. So the world grows with an expectation of something that's not true, but it may be real. There's a difference between true and real, I find. So, yeah, storytelling it's part of our DNA. I can't imagine a world where stories were not told in some form or another. In fact, I don't think you could have a world where stories aren't told in some way or another. Even with people who are not articulate or who stumble over stories. I mean, look at the original Rocky movie, for example. It was an incredibly inarticulate main character, but it was through his lack of ability to express himself that the story was told. So everything is a story. You can't have a world without stories.
Do you think it's possible to train people to be a storyteller?
No. I think storytellers are born. I think you can train people to be writers, but I don't think you can... I think being a storyteller is... Look, this sounds like it's terribly wanky, but I honestly and truly believe it. Since we've had a shift in our moral compass in the Western world, and part of that is because of the rejection of organised religion by so many people, storytellers, I liken storytellers to, even in my book, I liken them to John the Baptist. They are there to prepare the way for what's to come. They're also the new priests. They're the keepers of morality. They're the keepers of tradition. They're the keepers of ethics. And you can't teach that. You either have that or you don't. You have the ability to encompass a lot of abstract things alongside a lot of quite mundane, everyday things. And each storyteller, each real storyteller has a particular voice. I've never found two great storytellers who have the same voice. And I've found many writers who have the same writing style, but I've never met two storytellers who have the same voice.
Do you think the general public is aware that there is such a deep and mysterious craft called storytelling?
I think our Indigenous people, for example, are very conscious of how important the storytellers are. Funnily enough, most Indigenous peoples are. The Red Indians have a rich tradition of, the North American Indians, a rich tradition of storytelling, and it's full of symbolism, etc., 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 and it looks nothing like Breaking Bad. I believe that television, and it has been for a long time, has been our new Bible.
This is the story behind all stories. Is storytelling a shamanistic activity?
It does have a shaman-like quality to it, but when you say that, it makes it sound like you're some kind of wanker who writes esoteric self-help books, and that couldn't be further removed from me.
But if we were to say that often storytellers deliver the right story to the right people in the right way.
That's the trick. People would often say to me, you're such a good writer. Why do you write soap? You know, why don't you go off and do art house movies or something? Why? But that to me is preaching to the converted. I had things I wanted to say, and I wanted to say them to people who didn't know them. I didn't want to reinforce them for people who did know them. I couldn't see the point in that, quite frankly. I wanted to say to people who'd never thought about things. I wanted to shake them up. I actually believe that true storytellers are revolutionaries. We're all Che Guevara in some way, you know? We're all about shaking up the status quo or shaking up the normal mores and traditions and just saying, look at yourself, you know, just have a look at this. Have you thought about this? If you haven't thought about this, why haven't you thought about this? So it was a conscious choice for me that I would go through the most lowly regarded form of television writing. It's actually much harder than it looks, particularly if you do have things to say. I wanted to reach the people who never pick up a book. I wanted to reach the people who never think about what happens in their lives except to give it maybe a negative connotation, that never think about spirituality, that never think about huge issues. And I wanted to create stories on a mundane level through soap opera characters that held high concepts. And no one was doing that at the time. And so there was an opportunity for me to do it. I mean, bear in mind, Nathan, I didn't go to any writing course. I didn't go to uni. I had the chance, but I came out here to do a show at the Old Tivoli Theatre at the year I was supposed to go to Oxford. So I didn't go to uni. I didn't have higher education. I wasn't an intellectual. I was quite a visceral person even when young. I don't know how I knew the things I knew. So to get back to your shaman comment, all I knew was my purpose here is to tell stories. And if I don't do that, then I'm somehow not living the life I was meant to live. And when I meet people who are storytellers, I have this phrase that I say to them, and I usually write it on a card and send it to them. I say to them, this is a gift. This is the gift you've been given. Everyone's got a gift, you know. AFL players have a gift. Your gift is to tell stories. Honour the gift. If you always remember, honour the gift, you can't go wrong. You can't trash it. You can't write something that you know is a load of crap. You will stand up for your characters. You will stand up for what it is you're trying to say. But you have to honour the gift. If you've been given the gift, you've got to honour it.
Why do you think we have these different forms of storytelling? Why do we have stories in novels that are print? Why do we have stories on TV that's in the home? And why do we still have cinema stories?
That's a good question. You've been thinking about this one, haven't you? Each of those different forms, if you will, speaks to a different part of us. And we have multiple ways of coming to stories. Every medium has a different way of telling you the same story. Every medium. You know, soap might couch it in the mundane, the everyday, and you've got to, like I call it, Sarah Lee's Danish storytelling, layer upon layer upon layer. You've got to actually go looking for the stuff underneath. The theatre, even movies, have limitations on how much they can show you. And that's why theatre appears to be the domain, in audience terms, of the people with the richest imaginations, because you can put a play in a black box with nothing around it, and the audience member will create everything he needs to see. Now, a director will do that in a film, but you are still locked with the vision that the director gives you. In the theatre, you're not locked into any vision. You can go anywhere you want to go.
But isn't that almost what I call the game part of story? If we're going to see the world in this way when actually the real world doesn't operate that way.
You may think of it as a game, but I don't think true storytellers approach it as a game. Very often they would say, look, this is what we're saying, and it could actually happen anywhere, so therefore you pick the anywhere. That's the true connection between a storyteller and the person listening to a story. You pick the anywhere. Where are we? I don't know. We're somewhere in space. I can see stars going past, but I don't know. Are we on another planet? I don't know. There are people talking, but I don't recognise the language. So I could be either in Frankston or Mars, because I don't understand the language. So that whole idea of an alien landscape or no landscape at all, or putting the mundane somewhere completely different, like the Martian Chronicles, Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles, you know, which is like watching a soap opera set on Mars. You know, it's...
But I would still say certain stories and the form that a story takes can change our perceptions of the world, because stories show us that suddenly a person living in Tokyo, a person living in Glasgow, somehow go on a journey that are connected. True. And they may never connect even as individuals or characters.
But they connect somewhere in the great ether. I I taught myself the lessons I needed to learn through my stories and made me a much, much better person.
This is the story behind all stories.
Anytime you are deliberately manipulating story to get a different perspective or reaction, it's bad storytelling.
To write some of your stories, you've had to go to some of the darkest levels of what it is to be a human, as well as some of the brightest.
Yeah.
Has that had an effect on you?
It's made me a better person, a much, much better person. I was a complete demon bitch from hell 30, 40 years ago, as anyone who ever worked with me will tell you. I taught myself the lessons I needed to learn through my stories and made me a much, much better person. You can't be a good storyteller and be fearful. You can't have any fear. You can't fear someone laughing at you. You can't fear someone saying that's a load of crap. You can't fear people saying you're a wanker. You can't fear people's reactions. The storytelling is outside of the reaction to it. That's why I say it can't be a game. If it was a game, it would be conscious of manipulating the reaction. But the storyteller has to operate outside of the reaction.
Well, some stories in Hollywood are consciously doing that for commercial reasons.
Yeah, but they're bad storytelling. It's bad storytelling. They're storytellers who've sold out. They're storytellers who have trashed the gift.
You've been a champion for the stories to the public that you believe that they need.
Yeah.
And through the world of soaps and TV drama. Has it put you at odds with some of the producers and broadcasters?
Oh, dear, how long have you got?
Is there any example?
I've pretty much been fired from every show I've been on for refusing to toe the line. And it's quite interesting because you said, I suspect you've always been a maverick. And I've never seen myself as a maverick.
But surely commercial exigencies would put story outcomes at odds with what they would want to deliver to an audience.
Very
surely.
Often, and that's
because
why
outcomes might be deaths.
That's why I'd frequently get fired. It's why I was fired off Blue Heelers for killing Maggie Doyle. I was fired because I said that is the only way to keep the show going that the audience will buy as truth.
So you're not championing for the story itself. You're championing for the community that wants that story told.
More than that, what I absolutely believe you have to hold fast to is the truth behind the story.
For the viewer out there that wants to know how you do it, how would you explain how you can go inside a character and a situation that may be very alien to you, very alien to a lot of people in the audience, and somehow understand how that story can be told?
Well, there are sensibilities that we all have, but many of us don't use them. And they can be honed to help you do that. Empathy is one. If you allow yourself to empathise with other people, then you open a door to understanding how people feel, not how they think. Doesn't matter how they think, but how they feel, what's going on inside, what's affecting them viscerally. Mm. Too many people say, it's none of my business. I don't want to know about that. I don't want to get sucked into someone else's problems. Or, The storyteller needs to be open to anything and everything. A producer once said to me, you actually should be writing Walt Disney films, which I initially, and then he jumped in very quickly and said, I'm really not trying to insult you. I sincerely mean that all of the cartoons, The Lion King, even back to Snow White, etc., they're all high concepts. They all have concepts of finding yourself, the greater good of a community. They're very high concept stories that, by and large, ordinary drama can't carry. So he meant it as a compliment.
America seems to value its stories and its storytelling because they put a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
And they see it of commercial value.
Yeah.
Do you think Australia values its stories as much?
No, because there's very little commercial value in any storytelling here. Our films don't make money. Our television makes a little bit of money, but not a lot. Our books, God, you can't live on what you make as an author in this country.
Could it make more? If we valued it more, could it make more money for us? Do you think the world wants to hear the way we tell stories?
I think the world wants to hear good stories. I don't believe that stories have a specific ethnicity. I think the telling of stories, the dressing of stories, has an ethnicity, and ours has a different voice to other people's. But the stories themselves are universal. A good story is a good story is a good story, and it might be set on the upper side of Manhattan, or it might be set in the back of Burke. The visuals will be different, the dressing will be different, but the story will ultimately be the same story.
If Shakespeare was reincarnated today, what medium would he write for? Would he still be writing for the stage?
Oh, God, no. He'd be writing for television. And he'd be writing Seinfeld, or he'd be writing The Simpsons, because all of Shakespeare's plays were about entertainment. First and foremost, they were about entertainment. All the messages, all the darkness, everything else came at a secondary level or a tertiary level. He'd be in mainstream television. He'd be talking to the widest audience he could possibly talk to. I mean, if you look back before there were any of these visual mediums, Charles Dickens' novels were serialised in a newspaper. They were run as a soap. You bought the paper the following day and you got another chapter, and you had to keep buying the paper to get another chapter. Now they're revered. Oh, it's Dickens, and it's in a leather-bound volume and it's on a bookshelf, and everyone will say, oh yes, I have read The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and I don't think it doesn't have quite the same connotation of some of the earlier work, and everybody wanks on about it, but it was the 1890s equivalent of a soap opera.
When you wrote your book on the craft of screenwriting,
yeah,
you titled it Big Screen, Small Screen.
Yeah.
Do you think those years ago, and it's not that long ago, that you somehow saw that the nature of the mediums would shift and change, that we're only talking about screens now? We don't really talk... Television will disappear. Free-to-air television's going. So we're still disseminating stories, but they're just through screens now.
Imagine when we put on glasses and our stories are right in front of our eyes, and that will happen within probably a decade.
When you wrote the book, were you conscious of that idea that cinema and TV may disappear? But
I was conscious that story would always remain, and I did think it was changing, but no, I didn't consciously think we would come to the point of watching movies on computer screens or on, this still doesn't compute with me, on iPhones.
Where do we go next?
We have more story than ever, but we access it differently. That's all. The medium might be different, but it's not going to mean an end of story. It's not going to mean an end of drama. It may well be that eventually we will come back, we will reverse however many thousands of years, and you will get on your computer and you will tell stories and have stories told to you one-on-one. Just like round a campfire. It may well be. That might well be the future. But there cannot be. The world will end when there is no story.
They've spent all this time perfecting everything, and then you come in and say, oh, but unfortunately it doesn't hang together structurally, so can you move this and change this? And then they just have to do it all again.
To learn more about the program, leave a comment and stay in touch. Connect with our Facebook page.